Most billion-dollar companies didn't start with millions in funding. They started with a problem. And in the case of Airbnb, they started with something even more unexpected. Air mattresses on the floor. No investors. No funding. No big backing. Just an idea and a desperate need to make money. But somehow, that small idea turned into one of the biggest startup success stories in the world. So the question is, how did Airbnb raise its first money when nobody believed in them? Because the answer to that question contains powerful lessons every founder needs to understand. In this video, we're going to break down the real story of how Airbnb raised its first money, the struggles they faced, the unconventional strategies they used, and what you can learn from it for your own startup journey. Before we go further, if you enjoy content about startups, tech, and building real income, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And make sure you stay until the end, because toward the end of this video, I'm going to share something extremely important that most founders overlook, and it could completely change how you think about raising money. Now, let's get into it. The story begins in 2007. Two founders were struggling to pay rent. They were living in San Francisco, and they had a simple problem. They needed money. At the same time, a big design conference was coming to the city. Hotels were fully booked. People needed a place to stay. So they came up with a simple idea. What if they rented out space in their apartment? They bought air mattresses, set them up in their living room, and offered people a place to stay, along with breakfast. That's where the name came from. Airbed and breakfast. At this stage, this was not a startup. It was just a quick way to solve a problem. But something interesting happened. People actually paid. Strangers were willing to stay in their home. That was the first signal. The idea worked. Now here's the first lesson. Start with a real problem. Airbnb didn't begin with $1 billion vision. It began with a simple need. And that is how many great startups start. Now let's move forward. After this initial success, the founders decided to take it more seriously. They built a simple website. They tried to expand the idea, but there was a problem. Growth was slow. People didn't fully trust the idea. And most importantly, investors didn't believe in it. They pitched their idea again and again and got rejected over and over. No one thought renting air mattresses in your home was a scalable business. Now this is where most founders would give up, but they didn't. Instead, they did something unexpected. They got creative. They looked for another way to raise money. And this leads to one of the most famous startup funding stories, the cereal strategy. During the 2008 US election, they created custom cereal boxes, Obama O's and Captain McCain's. They designed the packaging, marketed it as limited edition, and sold it online. And it worked. They made thousands of dollars, not from their startup directly, but from a creative idea. This money helped them survive. It kept the startup alive. And more importantly, it showed something powerful. They were resourceful. Now here is the second lesson. You don't always need investors to raise money. Sometimes you need creativity. Sometimes you need to think differently. Because funding is not just about investors. It is about solving problems. Now let's move forward. After surviving those early stages, they continued building, improving the product, refining the idea, but they still needed real funding. That's when they applied to Y Combinator, a startup accelerator. At first, even that wasn't easy. Their idea was still unconventional, but eventually they got accepted, and this changed everything. Because Y Combinator didn't just give them funding, they gave them guidance. They helped them focus. They helped them improve. One of the key things they were told was this: go meet your users. So the founders did something simple but powerful. They went to New York, met their users in person, talked to hosts, took better photos of listings, improved trust, and slowly, things started to work. Bookings increased. Users grew. The product became better. Now here is the third lesson. Talk to your users. Many founders try to build from a distance, but real growth happens when you understand your users deeply. Now let's move to the next stage. Traction. As Airbnb improved, they started seeing real growth. More users, more bookings, more engagement. And this is where things began to change. Because traction changes perception. Before, investors saw risk. Now, they started seeing opportunity. And eventually, Airbnb raised its first real funding. But here is the important part. It didn't happen because of the idea alone. It happened because of persistence, creativity, execution, and traction. Now let's go deeper, because this is where most founders misunderstand startup funding. They think funding comes first, but in reality, progress comes first. Airbnb didn't wait for funding to grow. They built anyway. They experimented. They adapted. They survived. And that made them investable. Now, let's talk about something very important. Why did Airbnb succeed when many others fail? Because they didn't rely on one strategy. They combined multiple approaches. They solved a real problem. They validated their idea. They raised money creatively. They improved their product. They listened to users. They built momentum. And that combination is what made the difference. Now, let's come to the important insight I mentioned earlier, something most founders overlook. Airbnb didn't raise money because their idea was perfect. They raised money because they refused to stop. Let that sink in. They faced rejection. They faced doubt. They faced slow growth. But they kept going. They kept improving. They kept finding ways to move forward. And that persistence made them successful. Now here's the final truth. If you are building a startup today, you don't need everything to be perfect. You don't need investors immediately. You don't need a big team. What you need is a real problem, a simple solution, the willingness to start, and the persistence to continue. Because every big company you see today started small, just like Airbnb. And if you understand that, then you understand what it really takes to build something that lasts. Rock it.